Hey, veterinary friends. Thank you so much for being here for this podcast. I'm so excited because it's episode 300, and that's a lot of episodes. So I'm super proud of myself for getting this far in the podcast. I hope you've listened to me a couple of times and got something out of these episodes. I love bringing this podcast to you. I think it's super fun. I love interviewing all the people, and I love trying to bring you information that helps you in your life, in your career. So thanks so much for listening today. I hope this is going to be a fun podcast. It's just me. I don't have a guest today. So what I really want to talk about today is perfectionism. It's something that's so prevalent in our profession and can be so damaging to all of us. And I have some perfectionist tendencies. I imagine most of you do as well. So I thought it would be an interesting subject to talk about. Before we get into that, I just want to thank you all for all the support that you've given me over these past couple of years that I've been coaching. I think it's been 6 or 7 years now, maybe longer, since I started doing this, but the podcast has been going on for several years now, up to 300 weeks, which is amazing. And I just want to thank you all for your support. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for reading my blogs, reading my book, and reaching out to me for coaching. Whether it's one time, you just see me and coach once with me for free. I love that. I love meeting all of you. Or if you just reach out by social media, I love hearing from all of you. So thank you so much. And I want this podcast to be a little bit of a celebration of all of us that work in vet med, that love animals, and that are trying to get better. The self-development journey is no joke. It's very difficult, but I know that as we travel it together, that we're all getting better and feeling better in what we do every day. So thank you for that. That's my little soapbox speech. And now into this podcast about perfection. Most of us as veterinarians or people that work in this field have perfectionist tendencies. Our profession encourages it because we have such high standards. In medicine, in vet school, we're kind of held to these almost impossible standards. We're taught to strive for perfection early in our life, and our teachers push us, our parents push us. It's grades, sporting events, music lessons, whatever you went through as a child or whatever you're going through now, all those things push us towards perfection. And it sounds fun and enjoyable on the surface, but it causes us to become focused on the perfect and not on the process. And we know how difficult veterinary medicine is, and those unrealistic demands that clients put on us, that bosses put on us, that the profession puts on us, even the social media, Not One More Vet, all the mentorship social media sites that are out there, they all put this unrealistic demand on us. So deep down, we all know that perfection is impossible, and that desire to be perfect leads to anxiety, overwhelming feelings of fear of failure. It can cause depression and even thoughts of suicide. And so it's so dangerous at times, this perfectionism that we have. And it doesn't mean that we can't have healthy perfectionism, because that can lead to motivation and increase our drive. It helps us overcome adversity. It helps us learn from failure sometimes. But when perfectionism is unhealthy, it causes us to set these standards too high, and it will lead to stress, people pleasing, imposter syndrome, and all the other things that we're talking about today. It'll even lead sometimes to the thought that we don't belong, that we need to quit veterinary medicine, that we need to get out of this profession and do something easier or less challenging. And that's imposter syndrome. That's kind of the basic definition, is that we're not good enough to be in this profession. It will lead sometimes to thoughts of feeling unworthy, which you know that I've tried to teach before, that we're all worthy, right? So I just want us to think about this in a different way. And that's why I wanted to do this podcast for us today is how can we use our perfectionistic tendencies to our advantage without turning them into unhealthy traits, fear of failure, all those things. Being a perfectionist can be a symptom of anxiety. So sometimes our anxiety causes the perfectionism, and then anxiety can lead to more perfectionism. So it turns into this vicious cycle, right? And when taken to the extreme, that drive to be perfect becomes so toxic, so heavy, it really weighs us down. It causes us to focus on avoiding failure. It causes us to become more negative. And then we get stuck in inaction because we're afraid of a negative outcome or a subpar performance or someone critiquing us. We get this really unrealistic fear. And it's ironic because perfectionism that we are trying to achieve is keeping us from succeeding. Doesn't make any sense, right? It keeps us from trying new things because we fear this failure so much. So, what causes this perfectionism in us? I kind of touched on it a little bit, but the thing that causes perfectionism is that internal pressure, that desire to avoid failing, that desire to avoid criticism or judgment. The other thing that might cause it is social pressure brought on by the comparison trap, right? Comparing ourselves to other people. Social media makes it so much easier for us to compare ourselves to others. Before social media, and I was around before social media, there was that ability to compare yourself to those around you. So if you felt dumb at a conference, or there was another doctor working in your practice that made you feel less than, that was smarter than you, you had the ability to compare yourself to that person in your immediate vicinity. You might have felt a little bit inadequate when you were in those kind of situations. So maybe 20 people at a time at a conference, or maybe if you were at a meeting with a board. I used to be on the board of veterinary medicine. You might have thought, ooh, I'm not as smart as that guy or that guy. And so you had that little bit of comparison that you were able to do. But with social media and the internet, you've got the ability to compare yourself to millions of people, and that's not healthy. And it's false comparison anyway, because most people on social media are sharing a pumped up version of themselves, the best photos. I mean, I see myself doing that when I want to do a social media post, picking through my photos and being like, well, that one makes me look old, or that one makes me look ugly, or that one I was sweaty on my bike. And I don't want to put it out there because it's not perfect. And that's what social media is. And so we're comparing our everyday selves to other people's pumped up version of themselves. So it's not real. It's not real life. And unfortunately, it's so easy to do, right, with social media. And the other thing that causes us to adopt perfection is pressure from your family when you were a kid, or your family now asking you, what are you doing? What are you doing with your time? I feel that a little bit sometimes when someone calls me and says, what'd you do today? Well, there's a pressure to make sure I did a lot of things, right? So family pressure, school pressure, pressure with children or parents. If you have children and you're raising children, pressure from other parents raising their children. Awards when we were in school, right? AP classes, talent shows, TV shows of competition, which I love to watch, but that's part of the perfectionism striving, right? Striving, striving, striving. It teaches us that perfect is better, and that's not always great. So I looked up some information for you, and there was a study by a clinical psychologist, Simon Sherry, and a lecturer, Martin Smith, and they defined perfectionism as striving for flawlessness. flawlessness. That's a hard word for me to say. Striving for flawlessness, a state which renders an individual sensitive to criticism and plagued by self-doubt when estimating their performance abilities. So I kind of like that definition because it's an active definition, right? We're striving to not have flaws. And they did a study in 2019, and they found that perfectionism has increased substantially since 1990, which makes sense, right? They suggest that it's fueled by parents who have become more critical and more controlling and more helicoptery, right? Which a lot of us have. I admit it as a parent. And that want for parents to boast about their kids on social media. And then us boasting about ourselves on social media. And then we have unrealistic images of other people living perfect lives. And that's so, so true. And then I also read a little bit on Psychology Today. There was an article, and they broke perfectionism down into 3 domains. And I think this is kind of interesting because on some level, well, I'm sure it's true because Psychology Today said it, but on some level, I see it as being true. There's self-oriented perfectionism, which is imposing unrealistic desires or goals on ourselves. There's other-oriented perfectionism, which means imposing unrealistic standards on others. And then there's social perfectionism, which involves perceiving unrealistic expectations of perfection from others. And I see the other-oriented perfectionism a lot in veterinary medicine because we're so critical of our clients. We expect them to be kind all the time. We expect them to not get angry. We expect them to be, so patient when we're running behind. We expect perfectionism from them. And because of that, it causes more stress on us, which I think is really fascinating. I know that sometimes I think that clients are unrealistic in what they want. And so that thought that they're being unrealistic and they're being critical of me causes me to think more perfectionistic views about the world. And that isn't always super healthy. So I put together some signs that you can try to determine if you might be a perfectionist. It's kind of like that old thing is you might just be a redneck, but this is you might just be a perfectionist. So number 1 is you set unrealistic goals or high expectations for yourself, right? I do this every day. I always have this giant to-do list. I have my little bullet journal where I write down all the things I want to get done in any day. And I overestimate what I can actually do. So just that little to-do list, just that bullet journal that tells me all the things I want to get done today might make me anxious. So I could become anxious if I'm not meeting those standards. And it's kind of ridiculous, right? I'm causing my own anxiety. And maybe I should give up those to-do lists, right? So what I try to do now when I feel myself making these unrealistic goals for the day is I try to pick some priority. Like, what are the 2 things I really would like to get done today? And the rest can wait. And then if I get to the other things, fine. But then I can just move the other things to the next day and just kind of knock one off every day. And then a lot of times I have to add into my to-do list that self-care. That's so important that I need some downtime. I need some time to do something fun. I need some exercise time. I need time to spend with my husband or my dogs or call my kids. That has to be built in to your to-do list to make it less perfectionistic, right? The other thing that we do, or the other thing that's a sign that you might just be a perfectionist, is that we procrastinate because we have a fear of failure. And I don't know about you, but I am kind of a classic procrastinator. I've learned by coaching myself how to overcome that in many instances, but I still sometimes find myself wanting to procrastinate because I don't want to do it wrong. I might avoid starting to record this podcast because what if I don't understand my notes that I wrote? What if I stumble over words? What if I don't get my point across to you? All those thoughts cause me not to want to record a podcast, but many times I just have to do it and then say, okay, well, I'm doing the best I can. Hopefully someone will understand what I have to offer and get something out of it. So a lot of times it's just that fear of failure, fear of imperfection, fear of putting out B- work, as one of my life coaches used to say. And I love that thought, and I'm going to offer it to you. It's better to put out B- work into the world than not put out anything at all. And it gets a little touchy when we're talking about vet med, right? You don't want to do B- work. You want to do everything to A+ standards. But we all know that that is impossible. And sometimes the best we can do is an A- or a B for the pet or the client or ourselves. And so we can strive for A+ work, but sometimes we just have to accept that not everything's going to go the way we think it should. And especially in medicine, because it's unpredictable. So the fear of failure is a sign, and that procrastination is a sign that you're taking perfectionism too far. Perfectionists also don't take compliments well. Do you ever have someone say, oh, you look really pretty today, or I like your hair, or you're such a great veterinarian? If somebody says something like that to you and your Chihuahua brain says that that's wrong, or you start to hear yourself say, oh, well, my hair's kind of dirty, or I need a dye job, or I have done better in the past, whatever it is, whatever your brain tells you to push away those compliments, that's a sign that you're indulging in perfectionism. So try to take compliments just at face value. If someone tells you that your makeup looks good, accept it, embrace it, love it. Today I did a good job on my makeup, or today I had pretty hair, or I like your nail color. People say that to me a lot because I'm always changing my nail color. And sometimes I'll look at it and be like, well, I'm due for another manicure. It's not something that you want to do, right? Take the compliment. And then another sign that you might be a perfectionist is that you're continuously wanting to people please or crave approval from others. Looking for likes on your social media posts, that's a sign. Do you do that? I sometimes do. I'll be like, oh, how many people looked at my, last social media post? That's a sign that we're looking for outside approval. And it's more important to approve of yourself, love yourself, be okay with whatever it is that you put out there into the world. And that will help you be more healthy. So let's assume for now that we all have one of these traits, and maybe all of them, right? And can we agree that perfectionism is impossible? I think we can. Also, can we agree that striving for perfection can be healthy and unhealthy? Healthy in a sense that it can drive us towards our goals. It keeps us alert from making mistakes. It helps us look for problems. But when we take that perfectionism too far or too seriously, it leads to anxiety and avoidance of challenges, of feeling self-doubt, and sometimes unworthiness. So let's talk about how we can keep the healthy perfectionism, but also try to let go of the unhealthy perfectionism, because that's what we really want to do. So whether you're a perfectionist or not, it's okay, right? It's something that we all struggle with, or many people struggle with, and it's definitely okay. And you can use it to your advantage, and you can also recognize when it's causing unhealthy things in you. And then you can try to overcome it. So here's some steps that I kind of accumulated to help you overcome perfectionism. So first of all, it's recognizing when you're feeling like you have to be perfect. You can ask yourself some questions like, do I get angry or frustrated when I don't live up to my standards? When that to-do list makes you frustrated that you didn't get it done, that's a recognition that you might be taking perfectionism to an unhealthy level. Have you ruminated on mistakes? Have you had trouble letting mistakes go? Have other people told you that you have too high of standards? And do your standards prevent you from trying new things? Do you have trouble setting a goal and then moving forward without doing, a million hours of research, right? That's something that I have to do when I'm either writing or recording a podcast, is I have to do the research, true, but at some point I have to let that go and just go for it and just record the podcast. And then do you have an unrealistic fear of failure? So recognize your perfectionism first. And then what you can do is let go of some of the comparison mindset that you have. You can achieve at a high level without being perfect or living up to your perfect ideal. You can challenge the perfectionism by practicing mindfulness and staying present in the moment, changing your self-talk, saying kind things to yourself and others when they're feeling challenged, or when you see someone else's perfectionism popping up, you can say kind things to them. And then you can also try to hear the judgments in your head and change them to more understanding thoughts. And realize that failure is a really important part of success. I think John Maxwell says something like, failure is part of your stepping stones to success. And he's probably not the only one that said that. There's probably a million people that have said that. But if you can think of your little failures as steps to get where you want to be, that will help you let go of that thought that you have to be perfect. Try to practice more realistic thinking. So if you find yourself being critical, work to replace those thoughts with more realistic thoughts. And if that's too difficult for you, change your thoughts by thinking that you're talking to someone that you love. Like if someone else were in your shoes, what would you say to them? Like I have a best friend, Karen, and I love her unconditionally, and I would never want her to be afraid or think that she's not perfect, because in my eyes, she's perfect. So what would I tell my friend Karen if I was in this situation and her thoughts were telling her that she wasn't worthy or that she wasn't perfect? That's a really good way to change your mindset and practice more realistic thinking. And then another way is just to try to think more big picture. Sometimes the small details overwhelm us. And when you think about, okay, I made a mistake, ask yourself, okay, in the big picture, what does this mistake mean? Will it matter to my life in 5 years or 10 years? Can I use it as a way to get better, as a lesson? And sometimes we get bogged down in the small failures when the big picture is more about learning and growing. So if your Chihuahua brain says this is a huge deal, then ask yourself, will it be a huge deal in a year? Can I get over it? Can I let it go? And remember that we all have these times when we feel anxious and when we ruminate on imperfections. So we can focus on loving ourselves where we are, just the way we are in this learning process. So how can we let go of perfectionism? I just gave you some ways to do it, but just remember that you're talented, you're unique. There's a difference between achievement and perfection, and it took you many years of hard work and dedication to get where you are today. Remember that clients come to you and they show up in your exam room because they trust you and they respect you. They pay you like real money for your thoughts, your education, your discernment, your expert opinion, not your perfection. They don't expect you to be perfect. Maybe some do, but it's rare. So many clients will forgive you if things don't go the way that you want them to. And realize that veterinarians, like all other humans, are not perfect. You can strive for excellence. That's a really important thing to do. But know that the goal of perfection is impossible, and accept imperfections and small failures as part of your learning process. Set reasonable and achievable goals, not to lower the pursuit of excellence, but to give yourself a break and reward yourself for those achievements. Now, if you're really struggling with perfectionism, I say this a lot on the podcast, and I just want you to hear it today, that it happens to all of us. It's super common. It happens to me. It happens to all the people that you admire in vet med. Anybody that you've put on a pedestal, and I have my own people that I admire in veterinary medicine, they all have these tendencies. So it's fine. But if you're struggling, confide in someone. Get yourself a coach, get yourself a mentor or a therapist who can help you understand why you are struggling, and get help around that self-doubt. Those things are keeping you from your best self. They're keeping you from being the best person that you can be. And we all struggle. And just realize that, and that it's okay to get help. We all need help. We all need coaching. I get coached. Everyone should get coached. I believe in this truly. I believe in therapy. This is what's super important. So if you're struggling, don't feel alone. Just realize that we're out there. You can love yourself in all your imperfections. What was it? Love yourself, warts and all, right? Isn't that the saying? Okay, I have 2 quotes for you to finish up this podcast, and I hope you've gotten something out of this. My quotes are, one of them is from Richard Branson, who's a super smart dude, I think. And we would probably all agree on that. Richard says, "You don't learn to walk by following rules. You learn by doing and falling over." Important, right? We all learned to walk at some point, and we didn't quit. We're all walking right now, right? Unless we have some physical disability that keeps us from doing that, we all learned. The next quote I have is from Alan Klewicki, and it says, "The pursuit of perfection is frustrating and a waste of time because nothing is ever perfect. The pursuit of excellence is commendable and worthwhile. Therefore, strive for excellence, not perfection." And that's what we really want to do, right? So my homework for you this week is to reflect on your accomplishments over the past year, 5 year, 10 years. Write down all the good things that you have done, because trying to help your brain see the good in yourself is going to help dilute those thoughts that make you feel less than. What did you do good? And then if the bad things come up, what did you do that didn't go the way you wanted it to do? And what can you learn for it? Learn from it, I mean, not for it. And then set a goal for this week, or month, whatever feels good to you, and try something that scares you a little bit. Set a goal that you've been wanting to do for a long, long time, and your perfectionism has kept you from doing it. See then what your brain says. When you say, I'm going to, what would be something scary for me? I'm going to write a second book, because writing is something that I struggle with, right? What does my perfectionist brain say? Oh, it's going to be too hard. You're not good at writing, all the things. And then challenge those perfectionist thoughts. Practice letting them go and taking an action step anyway. Because that's the hardest part, right? Is just taking a little action. And then send me an email and let me know what you've decided to do and what you've decided to think and how it's going. How is your letting go of your perfectionism going? You can email me at jacapeldvm@gmail.com. You can find me on my website, theveterinarylifecoach.com or juliecapel.com. I have a little spot on there that you can send me an email. However you can contact me, let me know how it's going, and let me know if the things I've said today help. And even congratulate me for my 300th episode. That's my little plug that will make me feel great, about myself, even though I am deciding today to feel good about this accomplishment. So, thank you so much for listening to this today, my friends. I hope that I've given you some things to think about and some things to strive for. And as always, have a beautiful week. Bye.